It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to episode 5 of this season of Breaking Average. My name is Rick Morris, as your host, and I've got my co-host here with me, Paul Gustafson. How you doing, Paul?
Rick, great to be here with you today. I always enjoy just connecting with you, and I love what we're diving into. That's just been a lot of fun, and it's going to be a great journey here.
It's been challenging. It's challenging in a good way. You know, if the audience is following along with us, we're really going through a mastermind of 16 books here. And we did the first 2 already. So now we're going into book number 3. Today, we're going to be talking about Adversaries into Allies by Bob Burg. And this is one that I didn't read. So this was a new thing for me, something that I had to study and get into. But that's the challenging part. And we urge the audience, first of all, if you haven't read the book, don't turn off the podcast. We're about to give you a preview and all that other stuff. If you have, join in the conversation. But that's the beauty of a mastermind. Before we get into it, Paul, in fact, you've invited me to a few of your masterminds, and I love the way that you do it. And for a lot of people out there who are thinking of doing masterminds or wanting to do masterminds, I love the way you do it, Paul, in the sense of, look, you can read the book, but you don't have to read the book to have a productive conversation, because the book itself is a guideline. So again, if you haven't read the book or you're wanting to hear about it, we're going to tell you all about it, but don't turn off the podcast just because you haven't, please. Yeah. And if you have, then I'd love to hear what your take was on it. But first of all, let's get into the book itself. So Paul, why did you pick this book? This was one of your picks.
Yeah, it is definitely one of my favorite books. Years back, 2013 is when it came out. I think right at the end of the year. Had a chance to actually connect with Bob Burg, the author. He's the co-author of the book, The Go-Giver. It's a bestseller book, and was really compelled by it. So what he shared and framed up in that conversation really spoke to me. And then we masterminded through that book, and it continues to live with me. And that's one of our tests, right, Rick? When the books we're picking, these are books that are still living with us. There's some element of it, some spirit of it, some component of that book that continues to move us and shape us in some way. Now, it's not like we think about it every single day, but occasionally something will pop up. We'll remember, like, whoa, Bob Burg. And so for that, Bob Burg, his book certainly has done that for me. There's elements of it that continues to pop up at unique moments. I'm like, yeah, I'm thankful for that. And so we wanted to share with everybody, all our listeners and viewers, some of these books that have been compelling for Rick and I, and a lot of our listeners, a lot of you guys too. So we're hitting those books, and this is one of them. So I love the subtitle, Win People Over Without Manipulation or Coercion. And it's really about, think about 25 Ways to Win with People. John Maxwell, that's a great book, right? Or Dale Carnegie, trying to remember the name of that book.
How to Win Friends, Influence People.
Yeah. So this is kind of into that series. It's more of a modern take on that, and it's got some real science behind it. And that's why I love it. So
you just used a key word too, and I love that he calls it out in the subtitle. When you do a lot of personal growth, and when you talk about DISC profiles and all that stuff, I know when I teach DISC to organizations, a lot of times they're like, well, that's manipulation. I was like, no, manipulation is using a tool to get an adverse, gain out of it, to do so, to move you in a direction you don't want to move because that's where I want you to be, versus, DISC and Strength Finders and all these different things is really about meeting people where they are. So it's different to say, okay, I'm going to adapt my style so I can speak to you so that I can get you to move in a direction you want to go to. And I guess that's the end result of whether it's manipulation or not, is what was the intent of the movement, right? Yeah. Does that make sense? What's the intent of the movement?
Yeah. Think about it. For me, I remember I was dealing with some challenges, right? We all have kind of naysayers in our life, right? And in those conflicts that we have. And this book really kind of guided me through some of those challenges. And it was profound. It's profound. So yeah. So you ready to dive in? Let's kind of unpack the framework for this.
Absolutely. Go for it. So,
all right.
Let's start through it.
Yeah. So, and I love to hear your take on some of these things, but I'm just going to lay it out, guys. This is not in any way an exhaustive study of the book. All right. If you want, go grab it, go buy it, find it on Amazon. We'll post a link at breakingaverage.com. Check it out. We'll put all our resources that we're studying on the breakingaverage.com website. Bob Burg, if you're watching or listening, thank you for writing this book. It's profound. And I'm just going to unpack a little bit of it just so you guys have a sense of it. So basically, he shares principles of ultimate influence, this idea of the ultimate influencer. He's a big John Maxwell fan. He quotes him a few times, but others as well. And again, he pulls from some science and some research. And he says something very profound. He says, look, if you understand these 5 principles, right, you'll understand the basis of all human action and interaction. And I'm like, okay, that kind of anchored me in. All right. And I think that'll anchor a lot of our readers as well. If you grab this book, our listeners and viewers, if you grab this book and you read it, that'll anchor you in too. Those 5 principles, let me just go through them real quick and then we can kind of unpack them. Control your emotions. That's the first one. He says, that's where it starts. You got to start here. You can't, that's the first thing in the process. Every single time, control your emotions. Number 2, understand the clash of belief systems. So when we think about it, adversaries and allies. If we have adversaries, there is a belief system that other person has. Even our allies have a belief system. We've got to take time to understand their side of the beach ball, as our friend Scott Fay talks about. All right. Number 3, acknowledge their ego. Acknowledge their ego, and maybe your own. Number 4, set the proper frame. And I love this concept. This has been groundbreaking for me, setting the proper frame. And then finally, communicate with tact and empathy. Those are the 5 principles that he gets through, and really powerful. I can unpack some of those some more if you want, but which one of those jumps out for you as you hear that? Control your emotions, understand the clash of belief systems, acknowledge their ego, set the proper frame, and communicate with tact and empathy.
So reading through this book, the first one really jumped out at me, where he says, we make major decisions based on emotion and then back up these emotional decisions with logic. And that's, if you want me on paper, there it is. Like I'll have an emotional reaction. And then I use the word rationalize all the time. And he has a beautiful call out in there that if you really break down the word rationalize, then that gets rational lies. And I just, I was just like, okay, every once in a while you're like, this is uncomfortable because he's talking to me and I don't know the guy. Right. So it was really interesting for me, but that was me, or that is me all the time. I am a very empathetic, emotional type person. Mm-hmm. And I've really worked hard through my personal growth journey to do the logic on both sides. That would be the difference in growth for me over the last 10, 12 years. Is normally once I made that emotional decision, I would just back it up completely, no matter what. I would just dig in. That's it. I've made the decision. And now it's, but what's the alternative? Like, is there any logic on the other side is the big thing. So once I've had a couple of breakthroughs where I realized my emotions was the issue, right? That allowed me to start taking this breath, almost the count to 5 now before I respond, that whole piece. So that skill number 1 of control your own emotions was really, really powerful for me.
Yeah. It's powerful for me as well. So Rick, I'm glad you shared that one. These were all good. One of the things that I love, like, through key takeaways, we can unpack some more of these if you want, but one of the key takeaways for me was this idea of let calm be your default. That one continues to this day. Remember, I read this book 7-8 years ago. That let calm be your default has had more impact for me out of this book. I mean, and there's a lot of other good things, but that one alone itself made the cost of the book and the study of it absolutely worth it. Let calm be your default, because the reality is, to your point earlier, we either react or we respond. But if we can change our default in terms of how we react, think about it this way, right? Rick, you're in Birmingham. I don't know how bad traffic is, but man, traffic can be really bad here outside of Washington, D.C. And I've seen some crazy drivers who respond in a way that isn't probably, I don't know, probably not what their kids should see, right? You've seen some crazy drivers. And I've been in those situations before where my default isn't necessarily I want to react in a way that isn't probably what a high performer, right? We're going to be talking about that next week, or a high influencer should react, right? And that's just driving. So let's take that into the boardrooms, into the meeting rooms, into the workspace and the places where we connect with other people. What is our default? I've seen other leaders, fantastic leaders, who did not let calm be their default, and they allowed things to just go really squirrely fast. And then all of a sudden it messed up. Character is what happens when people don't see you, right? So sometimes in those high moments of pressure, how you react really tells everything about you. So you got to let calm be your default. So that was really key for me.
I love that one. Dr. Amen is a friend of ours, and we've had him on the podcast before. It talks about his ants, right? The automatic negative thoughts. And you bring up traffic and the trigger. I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast. I probably have, because I tell it all the time. But normally, I'm a rule follower for the most part. Just, when I see traffic and I see the pattern, I get over to the lane that I'm supposed to be. If it's backed up, I just wait my turn. But I used to be the CIO of an organization in Atlanta. So I used to have to go from Atlanta to Birmingham all the time. And if I couldn't get out of the office by 3:00, Paul, I just stayed till 6:30, because it would make no difference in at what time I got home. Right. So,
right.
But this one section on 285 where you're getting onto 20, it just notoriously backs up. And where I would get that negative thought is the people who run down, the side and cut over, which that still, I still struggle time to time with that, ball. But I would used to sit there, but I would not let anybody in. Like I'd be like, and in my head, I'd be like, you are going to have to hit me if you want to come over that bad. And if you start to think about the rationalization of that thought, really, dude, like, and what used to go through my head, it was my favorite, is like, these people think that I don't have to be somewhere, like they're more important. And I was like, break that thought down though, right? So the guy's pulling up and he's going, nope, he's more important than me. Nope, he's more important. Oh, there's Rick Morris. Yeah, I'm more important than he is. No, they're not thinking that. Either they're, whatever it is, are some honest people that just didn't know. Yeah. And most of the people, they're pulling a trick, but it cost me a half a second just to let off, to hold the brake and let them in, than it does for them. If they hit me, the hour and a half it's going to take to fill out the accident report and all the other, what I mean? It just, so to me, that let calm be your default is such a big thing. But I think we can all rationalize that with the traffic story for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely traffic for sure. Yeah. A couple quotes out of here. You're going to love this one. James Allen. I know you're good for a James Allen quote.
Oh yeah.
He says, the more tranquil a man becomes, the greater his success, his influence, his power for good. He is like a shade-giving tree in a thirsty land, or a sheltering rock in a storm. That's you know what? I've read a lot of James Allen, but I had kind of forgotten about that one. That's pretty good, isn't it?
It is. I'll tell you, one of the other key takeaways for me, I know we're doing kind of takeaways, but in the acknowledge their ego thing, that's something that I feel like that I stumbled across, and I've told this story before on the podcast as well, but it goes in line with my stuff that I talk about. Somebody's going to be the hero of the story, and really what that is acknowledging the ego side of it, right? So when he talks about he actually tells a story in the book of the dignitary and the waiter, and just to paraphrase it really quickly, but there's a senator there that there's only one pat of butter and he wants another pat of butter. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, I can't give you another pat of butter. And he's like, well, do you know who I am? Like if you've ever traveled in the airport, you've heard that like 30 times, like, do you know who I am? And he goes, I happen to be a senior, senator. And the waiter goes, yeah, but do you know who I am? I'm the guy who controls the butter. So, it's a great story, right? But that to me is they talk about like how you approach people and how you start to take an adversary, a potential adversarial position and turning it into an ally position. I kind of frame it the same way with like, there's an issue and I'm talking to somebody and I know there's corporate policies and I know there's things that I'm probably going to ask them to break in order to solve the situation. But I do the same thing. I go, look, I'm going to get this done. Like whatever it is that I'm trying to get. The story I always tell is about my iPad in rent a car. I left my iPad in a rent a car, realized in about 10 minutes, turned around to go back and get it. And they'd already moved the car to their processing area. And they were saying I was going to have to fill out a form and wait 2 weeks or whatever. And I was like, dude, it's right here. Like, and so I went to him. I was like, I'm going to get my iPad. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to get it. But somebody's going to be the hero of this story. And I'd love for it to be you. I'm a professional speaker by trade. I'm going to tell this story. And I was like, and Alex, I'd love it to be you be my hero. And he's like, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I said, that's fine. So I drove and looked it up and I found the lot where they were processing. I went up to the security guard that was there and he used the same, look, Alexis, somebody's going to be the hero of this story. Is it going to be you? And she's like, go on back, get your iPad. And I came back and I ended up blogging about it and sending it to her.
There you go.
I named her in the story, right? And her name wasn't Alexis, but I named her in the story. So I was integrous with that. But that was acknowledging their ego, that they have this ability to solve a situation for us, whether it be corporate policy, whether it be whatever, they have the power as a human to make a decision that's human, that can solve something, but you don't get there unless you acknowledge that ego, that they have the power to solve it. Does that make sense? I love that.
Yeah, very cool, very good. Yeah, one of my other takeaways, we talk about influence. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? So I think he makes a comment about that. And one of the comments that he makes, and this is power. This is a powerful statement. He says, your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. That was like, drop the mic.
Yeah.
Like, guys, we're talking about leadership. We're talking about influence. And Bob Burg says, your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interest first. And I've been processing that over the last 8 years. And it's absolutely true. If I place, to your point right there, iPad, the lady says, go ahead, go back there, right? She was actually in a position of influence. Think about that.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're telling a story about her, Alexa, which makes my kitchen want to go on, but that's a different story. Of course, I'm referring to the Google device that we all have in our kitchens probably now. But I also like this other quote. He says that people don't commit to things, they commit to people, and they typically commit to people who they believe care about them. So that's influence. So I love the law of influence too. So let calm be your default, the law of influence. Any other takeaways that you had from this book?
Well, just double backing on that, on what you just said. When you were talking about ego and that piece of influence, he said the ego is nothing more than one's sense of self, right?
Yes.
So everyone has that. Everyone has an ego, right? And we always say that ego, a lot of times when we're discussing ego, it's in a negative context. But failing to acknowledge that ego, he says, if you bruise it by failing to acknowledge another person's sense of self, then you're going to have a real hard time winning that person over. So it's the same, right along the lines of what you're saying, but just recognizing that you've got to protect that ego if you're trying to win them over or move the needle to a different direction.
Yeah, I love that. On the ego thing, I remember there's a quote that I highlighted. He said, 95% of the time, being able to move a person to your side of an issue comes down to how you make him or her feel, right, about himself or herself. right? How you make
That's
them
right.
feel. So really powerful, this whole ego thing. Another takeaway from me, my third one, is the 4 qualifying questions on the belief system. Those were
Yeah.
powerful. Those questions, guys, and here we'll just rattle them off real quick. And Rick, I'd love for you to comment on this. Number 1, how is my personal belief system distorting the actual truth of the situation? Right? So asking that question, that's a hard question to ask. How is my personal belief system distorting the actual truth of the situation? Not seeing the whole picture, right? So that's admitting to ourselves that there are gaps in our story and that maybe we need to get those filled. Maybe we need to get a better perspective. Maybe we need to hear the other person. That leads us to question number 2. How is his or her personal belief system distorting the actual truth of the situation? In other words, you're actually recognizing the fact that they themselves have a belief system and may have gaps as well. Okay. And you're not trying to address those head on yet. You're just trying to be aware that they may have a few things, and you're reflecting here, guys. The third question that you can ask is, what will clarify my understanding of their beliefs? All right. Seek to understand before being understood. That's the idea here. So you're trying to really understand and empathize with them. Again, right? We're influencing. 4 qualifying questions. The fourth one is finally, hey, what's the information that I can give that will help clarify their understanding of my belief? All right. So now we're creating common ground. We have an understanding of their perspective, and now we can share with them ours. So those 4 qualifying questions I thought were really good.
They are. They're fantastic. You said it perfectly. They seek first to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
But each one of us kind of see the world in a unique way, right? It's a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, media, your parents' views, all those different things. But a lot of times, because that was the only way we saw things, we fail to see that other person has all of those same factors.
Yeah.
All of those same factors. And what's interesting, I think, with what's happening in society at this point, which is a way, you and I are both technology geeks, right? We love technology, and it's the algorithms in order of what we like. Therefore, we're going to support that, right? Because the goal of most platforms is to make sure you don't leave the platform, right? So if I'm on Facebook, Facebook doesn't want you to leave. And so what they do is they go, oh, he liked this, or he read this, or he spent 30 seconds on this. I'm going to give him more of that material. And what's happening is we're becoming more and more founded in our own personal beliefs. That's and right. Finding support of our own personal beliefs, that we're getting further and further away from being able to see the other side. And they call that an echo chamber.
Yes.
One of the greatest stories I've seen about this was a guy, black gentleman that was a barber, that said that he recognized the echo chamber. So he created a fake Facebook profile as a white supremacist. And he said he just wanted to see what was being done on the other side. He said what he got out of that more than anything, which he didn't recognize, is that he learned empathy. Because when he saw the information, the same information he was getting, but it was presented in a different way, he could start to see why they believed certain things that they believed, which led him to an empathy and almost a common understanding. He says, now we're on 2 totally different things, but he realized that if we could just get to a point of empathy with each other, then we can actually start to talk through these different belief systems and grow. But what's happening with social media and everything else is that we're just getting supportive information to our current belief system, that it's hard for us to break away and see another one. I found that really empowering, in that clash of belief systems is what triggered that.
That's so good. I've noticed that with Twitter, right? So Twitter, they're feeding you the things that they think that you like Washington football team. And, of course I like the Washington football team, but all these feeds of things that are happening, I'm like, well, wait a minute, there's another perspective of the world that I'm not seeing. So I have to sometimes log in and kind of clear out that cache and allow myself to just kind of look through the feed. It's not being forced to me by the things that they think that I like. And that's social media. But the reality is that people are doing that to us all over, right? We need to take time to really understand other people's perspectives, for us to really empathize, as Rick is talking about. I think that's so important. So yeah, lots of great tips and challenges out of this thing too. So let's I'm ready to share some of those if you want to get into it. So again, we're just encouraging you guys. You may want to grab this book. It's been out a few years. It's worth it. You want this on your bookshelf for sure. But any other thoughts before we get to tip and challenge?
No, it's a phenomenal book. It's actually a pretty quick read. But don't read it quick. Yeah. So, that's the different thing, because there's a lot of little nuggets, just a one sentence here, one thing like there, like let calm be your default, as you said. It sometimes can be easy to blow by things like that, but come to it with an open mind. It's a phenomenal book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say a tip and challenge for me, Rick, is I love this idea of tact and empathy that he talks about. He talks about communicating with tact and empathy. So I wanted to share this tip and then share a challenge. So I love what his dad said. His dad says that tact is the language of empathy. And it's a language of strength, really, is what he says. Tact is the language of strength. And tact is the ability to say something in a way that makes the other person feel less threatened or defensive and more open to you and your ideas. This is really vital. Guys, if you're trying to influence, this is really vital. All right. Tact is something that you don't see a lot of, right? I'm just south of Washington, Rick. There's not a lot of tact in the political commercials that I hear and see, and then the rhetoric that's happening. There's not. All right. I want something more. So if I want something more, I've got to be something more. Therefore, if I want to be something more, and I want to be that kind of influencer, a person that's making the impact and helping transform lives, then tact has got to be a part of that. So the challenge for me is, okay, I got to apply more tact. And this whole idea, and I'll just kind of close it here with this, right? His idea of talking about responding versus reacting. Respond instead of react. And I love this challenge. He says, write the word respond versus react on a couple stickies. Put them in different places so that you can remember it. He says you can influence almost every interaction for the better he says this, when you react, you are being controlled by outside circumstances, right? Driving, we just talked about that earlier. But when you respond, you're in control of yourself and of your emotions. Respond versus react. There's a difference there. We get to choose. And then this ties in with this tact and empathy thing. So how about you, man? Tip and challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said around, the tact and even kind of the Washington, political things. We're podcasting under a platform of Breaking Average. And what's interesting is if you see somebody try to, and I'm not talking politics, I'm just talking in general. If you see somebody try to do something different. So why do these political attacks always happen? Even when they come out and say, we're going to run this clean campaign or whatever, it's still like, taking one issue out of context and just blasting that, right? They do it on both sides. The reason why that's so pervasive is because it works. Mm-hmm. Because on the average person, that's going to move the needle in influence. One of my favorite things to do during the political season is to watch when they start to interview people and say, why are you voting for this person? Why is it that you made this decision? And they're just rattling off the things that came out of those political like it's clear. And so my tip is to recognize that you have an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. And my challenge is to break out of that.
Yes.
So one thing that I do when it comes to politics, and I'm not, it doesn't matter which side you lean, and I'm not saying one side's better than another. What I do is I educate. And how I do that is when there's something that's major that's happening, maybe there was a debate, maybe there was just a large political issue or a scandal broke. I set my DVR and I record a little bit of CNN. I record a little bit of Fox. I record a little bit of like a local NBC. And then I normally like BBC or Bloomberg, some not Bloomberg, but BBC or BBC World that's outside the country.
Yeah.
And I watch all of that so I can hear the different spins, but I experienced it for myself. Like I watched it myself. I saw it. And then I watched these little recordings to hear, okay, what's the thing they're going to grab onto and push. And that allows me to kind of rise above and make a decision where I want to be. But I hear all sides. I hear all points before I make that decision. That's a challenge, right? So when you have an adversarial position, maybe at work, right? And you know somebody's really against you, and maybe they have a right-hand person. They're really against not you, but the way that you want this decision to go. Go sit with them and get educated as to why they're just as passionate about not doing something as you are passionate about doing something. And take all of that in objectively, and you'll make better decisions, which will end up influencing others as well.
I love that. That's so good. It stirred for me a movie. Remember, have you ever seen the movie Vantage Point?
Yes.
Dennis Quaid?
Yes.
And I love the idea of that, right? So what you see from one camera isn't necessarily the full picture of what's really happening. And Vantage Point it's just a masterful job in a movie. It kind of, there's a situation that happens, and I won't give any spoilers away, but they've got to find the real truth of what actually happened. And so fortunately there's enough cameras, and they kind of go back and review different angles, and it's sort of life, right? Sometimes we've just got to change our vantage point. We've got to see things from the other perspective, like Scott Fay that we talked about earlier. You got to see it from the other side of the beach ball, and that's what you're talking about, understanding all those points. So
yeah, I call it framing too. Like I put a TED Talk together. What I do is I found these stories that are widely held, like that 95% of the people believe this story happened this way because that's the way it was portrayed. And then you just show the flip side. One of them, just really quickly, it was Prince William, where England was flipping off reporters, right? Was giving them the middle finger. And that ran like crazy. Tons of people know that, but there is a different shot of that where he's actually just waving, right? But the angle in which this one picture was taken looked like he only just had the middle finger. It was almost like, if you're watching me, it was almost like this, you know what I mean? But that one, so he's waving and just the finger was extended. But on one view of it, it clearly looks like he's given somebody the middle finger. But from another view, he's not. But when you see those things and you understand the frame, that I can take one frame of any picture or any video and spin it into a direction that I want to, which is what a lot of people do. That's what a lot of these fake stories on Facebook and Twitter and that kind of stuff are. But it's just interesting. So I have a ton of those photos, Paul. I have to show you where these back and forths where this is the story, but this is what really happened.
The real truth behind it. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, guys, this has been so much fun. Boy, I wish we could share more with you on all these different ideas, because I want to get back into the Wright brothers, and because that's another story that I think we've already shared in here in terms of, it's not the Wright brothers, it's Catherine too. She was a big part of this thing. And there's so many other stories, right? The influence happens. Influence happens when we're more aware of what's happening in our world, and understanding more of what other people are feeling and experiencing and seeing, and then allowing ourselves to be able to inject and serve them. And we're going to be talking a little bit more. I can't wait to unpack more of these books here, Rick. It's going to be a lot of fun. We want to invite you to go visit our website, breakingaverage.com. Check it out. Certainly, you'll see these books as we unpack these over each week. We're going to share with you a little bit more details and data on the book and how you can get to it. We want to encourage you, just grab these resources, support these authors. They've done a phenomenal job. They've spent a lot of time and effort into these books. Rick and I both know what it's like to pour our energy into books, right? And maybe, by the way, Rick, we should talk about what it takes to write a book. I think that'd be kind of a fun episode, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Love to tell the stories.
Yeah. But boy, this has been fun. So I'll let you kind of close it off, but this has been great. I've really enjoyed this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, join us for the next one. We're going to be doing High Performing Habits by Brendon Burchard. It'll be the next book that we do. And again, we're going through 16 of these. So we once again are inspired by our mission of breaking average, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.